2014, in the month of June, Dark Souls 1 became available for download for those who had an Xbox Live Gold membership, and this was back in the day where I'd try every new free game for gold, and Dark Souls would just happen to be one of those games, one of those mysterious, unsuspecting, innocent games. Little did I know, within those next incredibly special moments of this adventure, this entire franchise would mean a lot more to me than just a video game, as cliche as that may sound. In this 3-part video essay series, I want to discuss what sets the Dark Souls franchise apart by going over the open-ended exploration, a challenging but rewarding combat system, an immersive and atmospheric world, and a lot of the overlooked deep and complex lore. But before I do, I want to quickly make note of some things. This video and a lot of the videos following won't discuss many DLC areas or optional bosses that aren't important, as a surprising amount of people haven't even touched the DLCs, and for some of these games it would make these videos a bit too stretched out. Secondly, most gameplay is captured by yours truly using the PC for Dark Souls Remastered and Xbox 360 for the original. Later videos with Dark Souls 2 and 3 will be captured entirely using a PS5. However, when it comes to things I may have missed, I'll sometimes pull some gameplay from other creators on YouTube and be sure to link their accounts in the description as well, whenever their videos may play. Also, not sure if it matters that much, but I didn't use any summons, NPC, or players throughout any playthrough because I wanted a better grasp on the varying difficulties between each game, and my god, there are varying difficulties to say the least. However, I will still touch on the multiplayer aspects of the games, with both the good and bad parts of it, and yeah, I most certainly think that every single Dark Souls game is a masterpiece, even Dark Souls 2. I think Dark Souls 2 has some better aspects than 1 or 3, but it won't stop me from giving quite a lot of constructive criticism, especially with Dark Souls 1, because even if something's a masterpiece, it doesn't mean it's perfect in every single way, shape and form, because that's just impossible for any game or anything to even accomplish. But with that out of the way, let's get into Dark Souls 1 from the first flame all the way to the linking of the fire. The creation of the world within this universe is not too different to our own. In both cases, a mysterious force is responsible for breathing life into a primordial void. In Dark Souls, this force is known as the First Flame, and it's responsible for bringing light, warmth, and life into the world, however coupled with darkness, cold, and death. Before this Big Bang type event, there were everlasting dragons that existed in a fixed and unchanging state, neither alive or dead, they just were, as were the trees and the rocks. However, these dragons were said to predate life itself. This was titled the Age of Ancients. During the events of the First Flame, humanoid beings began to rise from the ground and make their way toward it, discovering warmth for the first time. 4 of these beings would discover the Lord Souls beside the flames and attained immense power, becoming kings in their own respects. Nito claimed the soul of death. The Witch of Izalith and her Daughters of Chaos claimed the soul of life, and Gwyn claimed the soul of light. Afterwards, in secrecy, a 4th soul called the Dark Soul was discovered by another being known as the Furtive Pygmy, which took it and hid it away. The Pygmy is known as the race of shitheads and shit-eaters, the race of humans. The 3 lords with their great power concluded that they could overthrow the dragons and become the new rulers of the Ashen World. Thus, cooperation began and war was imminent. The 3 put up a monumental fight against the dragons. The Witch of Izalith and her Daughters of Chaos orchestrated deadly firestorms across the lands. Gwyn discovered that his bolt of lightning could peel back the scales of the dragons, and when they landed, Nito would be the final bringer of death, finishing the dragons off. What really turned the tide of this battle was another dragon, Seath the Scaleless, an albino dragon portraying betraying their own kind. After all, scales being the source of the everlasting dragon's immortality made Seath extremely envious of his unfortune, and turned his back on the dragons in his own quest for immortality. Seath wasn't the only betrayer of his own kind, however. Gwyn also had a once loyal son, his firstborn, who he tried to wipe away from history after sacrificing everything to side with the ancient dragons, the Nameless King. And although many others were involved in the defeat of the dragons, Knight Artorias and Ornstein to name a couple, the unsung warriors of this war were in fact humans, who, just like the Nameless King, were intentionally removed from history, leaving all of the glory for the three lords and the loyal knights. Gwyn did not trust the humans, in other words, the pygmy, for keeping another lord soul in secrecy. However, the Nameless King's betrayal does raise an interesting fact. The dragons did not hate the other races, seeing as they accepted the Nameless King so easily. This is solid evidence that the keepers of the Lord Souls did indeed initiate this war, and the dragons were only defending their lives. But inevitably, most of the ancient dragons, apart from a select few including Seath the Scaleless, perished in battle. Thus began the Age of Fire. However, after a couple thousand years, the fire would begin to fade. This caused Gwyn to become frantic and drastic, ordering the Witch of Izalith to create the first flame again to prolong the Age of Fire. However, while she successfully created an unnatural flame, it grew at an uncontrollable rate, forming into a flame of chaos, and neither her nor her daughters were able to restrain it. The flame inevitably devoured the witch and used her soul to fuel itself, forming into the bed of chaos and mutating the occupants of the city into demons. Ever wondered why Blighttown was a piece of shit place to go to? This is probably why. Due to this colossal failure, Gwyn divided his Lord Soul and gifted it to Seath the Scaleless and the four kings of New Londo. Then afterwards entered the kiln of the first flame and sacrificed himself to prolong the Age of Fire and let the Age of Gods live on. Gwyn was so scared of the dark that he sacrificed himself with light. Like, Jesus Christ, just get a lava lamp or something. There are a lot of theories that the Age of Fire started after the first flame, or rather after the Lord Souls were discovered, or that the first flame really was not the first flame and it's just an endless cycle of fire, and no fire, and patches, and no patches. This brings up a significant point about the lore. Not a lot is known about the lore. Hidetaka Miyazaki frequently borrowed English books about fantasy and science fiction that he did not fully understand, and allowed his imagination to fill in the blanks by using the illustrations shown in the contents. His design philosophy when it came to developing games was influenced by this, and although this may seem lazy when it comes to story building, there is lore that is set in stone and lore that is left up to speculation. This is just the style of his design. There's lore set in stone such as the first flame, the war, and the Age of Fire. This all truly did happen, although not knowing how or why the first flame began isn't exactly an end-all be-all, and it's not a terrible thing if we never know. I mean, we don't even know what started the Big Bang in our own universe. This is one of the coolest aspects about the Dark Souls franchise. Sometimes a movie like Shutter Island has the best type of ending, leaving you to think and question what happened and why. I'd like to think that the dragons existed in some form of being before the first flame, and that they knew and told the keepers of the Lord Souls that the fire is inevitably going to go out, and the Age of Darkness will be inevitable. It will be unstoppable. This is all simply a cycle, and simultaneously the unnatural recreation of the first flame had already been in the talks between Gwyn and Izalith, which enraged the dragons, leading to the conflict of the war, seeing as the three did not want to lose their lordship or rule and wanted to extend their reign. And maybe the dragons were just in the way of their plans, telling them that they can't do that, that the cycle is inevitable. By the way, this is not anything I'm confident in, and when it comes to discussing theories, I'll leave this all up to you to discuss. However, it's cool to think that the world beforehand could have been the world of Elden Ring, or the world of Demon Souls, or the world of Bloodborne, as they share a lot of similar landscapes, and yeah, Patches is present within all these games. You know what? Maybe Patches started the first flame. Miyazaki genuinely wants your mind to have fun with the story and come up with your own theories. However, before we look more into the lore, playing Dark Souls yourself for the first time can evoke a wide range of emotions. From dread to anxiety to triumph and joy, you might experience a sense of accomplishment when you finally surpass a hurdle you thought insurmountable, or a feeling of fear of the unknown when you explore a new area. Of course, there's undeniably frustration as you find yourself dying repeatedly and possibly lose half an hour to an hour of hard-earned progress because your dumbass pressed circle and rolled off a cliff, but really it wasn't your fault. This game just sucks, but really it's not, and you quickly learn to take full accountability of your own performance in this game, because it's the only way you can get better. It's the only way you can improve. But for most, this is the first hurdle of many. I know it was for me. Death in every single Dark Souls game is inevitable for people who aren't, you know, these guys right here. And death is intrinsic to the story. See, you are cursed. Being the keeper of the Dark Soul, like Eve having a delicious crunch of the forbidden fruit, in addition to the unnatural prolonging of the Age of Fire, a curse was spread across the world, and beings who die return to the bonfires, perpetually repeating the cycle of life and death until they lose their sanity or will and become hollow, eventually becoming permanently dead. And you play as this cursed pygmy, returning death after death, facing almost insurmountable odds to have a chance of having the fate of the world in your own hands. Becoming hollow is a term for players to leave the game and not return. You see, a forgotten, worthless descendant of the pygmy facing off against the lords of life, death, and light isn't supposed to be easy. You will die repeatedly and deal with helplessness, and a lot of people will lose their hope along the way. Not only the other humans who tell you the journey is pointless, but other real-world players who can't get past the Gargoyles or Ornstein and Smough, and I mean, I don't really blame you, but I think calling this game hard is an overstep. These games are challenges. However, after a few playthroughs, a lot of the bosses you had trouble with can become laughably easy. I feel like most games struggle to juggle challenge with difficulty, and Halo 2 Lasso is a perfect example of that. I mean, only one person in the whole universe has beaten that deathless. I'm sorry, but that's just fucking ridiculous. Whereas with Dark Souls, the more you play, the better you become, regardless of level. You can do a level 1 playthrough with a broken sword, deathless, if you train at it. I'm not suggesting you to try, I mean, look, if you want your life to be okay, you don't do that. If Dark Souls ever implemented an easy mode, it would ruin the whole story, because it would lose its sense of despair, and there are things that you can do that make it easy, sometimes way too easy. You see, multiplayer is a fantastic addition to the Dark Souls franchise, and they all operate in similar ways among the three games. When you regain humanity or Ember, you're able to cross the gaps between the world and engage in jolly cooperation, or invade other players, or be invaded. You're not only able to cross the gaps between the worlds, but these worlds can be centuries apart. This could indeed be proof that the Age of Fire and Age of Darkness is an endless cycle that will never end, and other people like yourself will always have and always will be on this exact same journey. This is how I interpreted what Solaire was saying, at least, but regardless, multiplayer can make the experience more challenging when you get some guy with a Japanese name invade your world and spank you sideways, but you can also summon people with a Japanese name before heading into a boss fight and not even have to touch the boss before it's over. So yeah, I mean, summons can be your easy mode. But I need to say, the multiplayer community community is one of the most respectful and orderly online experiences I've ever personally come across. When you enter someone's world or someone enters yours, it's important before battle that you bow at each other, maybe even wave beforehand, but always bow or you're a dickhead. Then still right before battling, you jam the LB or L1 bumper to say, I'm ready, are you ready, I'm bloody ready, okay, warm up phase is over, I'm truly gonna show you who is the man, but don't heal. Usually the person being invaded always has more Estus flasks at hand, so the invader is left with a huge disadvantage. Or maybe the person who's being invaded has used up all of his Estus flasks, so even if they're still at similar skill levels, it could be an uneven fight, so it's courtesy not to heal, and for the battle to just be sudden death. I really like how these rules were not set in stone. The community somehow all collectively agreed that this is the way to do things for whatever reason, and even all the way down in Australia this was passed on. This is one of the coolest aspects about Dark Souls, and it was downright hilarious when all of the rules just flew out the window among the release of Elden Ring. You could easily tell who was a Dark Souls player and who wasn't, or who was always a ball bag. But in addition to the multiplayer aspect of the game helping you with bosses or even how to get to bosses, notes can be left behind by players to help you where to go, or to even deceive you in jumping off a cliff. Again, it was hilarious tricking people into doing this with Elden Ring, because you can be a part of the problem and upvote messages for their usefulness or deceitfulness. It's important to say that the only reason why these notes are there in the first place is other players upvoted them, so it's not the person's fault that it's there. And even in Dark Souls 3, the developers added a gesture mechanic, being able to add pointing to notes to show you exactly where the hidden area is, or where to jump off and find some nice loot. These elements do make the game a lot easier than a lot of people who haven't touched a Souls-like game would come to believe. However, this hasn't stopped the community from attempting to create their own rules on how to play. Some players insist that the proper way to play the game is to play completely blind in offline mode, refraining from online guides, and not even summoning NPC players to help with your battles. And while for your first ever playthrough I would urge you to attempt this way, I don't think cutting out all the help is necessary, although farming embers or humanity to have endless summons is also quite ridiculous as well. I do believe there needs to be a healthy middle ground when it comes to these experiences, because after all, these games are challenging for a reason. However, going through New Game Plus, cooperating with a friend the entire way through and beating the game in like a couple hours is extremely fun as well. These are the aspects of multiplayer that I do enjoy within FromSoft's games. However, there is one big one that newcomers do not enjoy. There is no true seamless co-op, and it can be confusing to wrap your head around. If you want to summon a friend to complete the whole Dark Souls adventure by your side, it is not as easy as you might think. For one, humanity or ember is limited, and in some situations you must farm to get them. Secondly, you need to beat the boss 2 times if you're going through the game with a friend, 1 for each host. Thirdly, you'll need to make sure that you have a secret password set in stone so you can interact strictly with just your friend, because with such an active community to this day, the chances of you just summoning a complete random is fairly high. Fourthly, which doesn't even sound like a word, there is absolutely no voice chat in Dark Souls 1, none whatsoever. This makes it extremely hard when you're summoning someone to tell them where you're going or what to do. Since there's a lot of people who place their summon signs at bonfires, you can have no clue which boss the summoner is going to head to, or if they're even going to a boss in general. This problem applies to every single Dark Souls game, and in Dark Souls 3 I can't say how many frickin' times I was summoned right outside the Dancer boss fight, only to be taken by the summoner to the Vort boss fight. And this problem is no one's fault, seeing as a lot of newcomers may not even know about a second boss that might be in that area. However, this dilemma can cost you valuable ember or humanity. And lastly, the biggest problem that newcomers could face: when you defeat a boss, your friend gets the boot and gets sent right back to their world. This is confusing because you can resummon them and continue the game normally, however it's just a waste of resources and time. These problems, however, isn't an end-all be-all for multiplayer, and like I said, you shouldn't rely on multiplayer to get you through your game. And you might already have enough resources to get the amount of summons you desire. However, it would be nice for you to be able to have a straight up co-op from start to finish, especially with New Game Plus. Even if it was strictly for New Game Plus, that would encourage a lot more replayability for an already extremely replayable game. But my conclusion for this topic is multiplayer is fine and it doesn't hurt the core game in any big way. I mean, I barely even use multiplayer myself, so I just thought these problems were worth bringing up. In addition to death and multiplayer being intrinsic to the story, so are the other mechanics. Estus flasks are usually seen as just another health item in the game. However, From Software thought of a way to make it connect to the story in a way that makes meaningful sense as well. You drink fire, my brochicho. When you rest at each bonfire and regain all your health and refill your Estus flasks, you're healing with fire and filling up the flasks with fire, the one true source of all life in this world. And if you want to know more about something or someone, read the item descriptions or weapon descriptions of someone that you killed. For example, you'll find out that the Asylum Demon is wielding a stone arch tree. Yes, the very first big bonk instrument of death you come across is a damn arch tree, my guy. A tree that was around during the Age of Ancients. But yeah, everything that I just mentioned will pretty much be applied to every single other game unless there's notable differences that I want to point out. And from here on, I will talk mainly about the story and maybe bring up some other mechanics if it comes up. But let's start from the Undead Asylum where you will start the game. Many branded with the dark sign were hunted and driven far away to the north to the Undead Asylum, where they were locked away. You are not permitted to leave, and few have managed to do so successfully, as there's two Asylum demons that block your way, one above ground and one below ground. Unable to die, the beings locked away are left to go hollow and slowly drive themselves to insanity. You, the player, are one of these undead, awaiting the end of the world in your small jail cell, until a mysterious knight drops a corpse from above you with a key attached to it. We later find out that Oscar is the knight's name, and he offers all he has to the player so they could take up his journey and complete his quest.
In thine exodus from the undead asylum, maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. When thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know.
Not too much is known about this character, however you could later find his armor set discarded in the Darkroot Garden, stating that the wearer is from Astora. He seems to realize that he is hollowing, which is why he came to this asylum to pass the torch onto you. And if you return here later in the game, you will find him hollowed and hostile. It's not clear from the start if you're truly the chosen one in this story, or if this quest can be handed out to any undead or any descendant of the pygmy. However, something important can be noticed in his words that could answer this question.
There is an old saying in my family, thou who art undead art chosen. In thine exodus from the undead asylum.
So this prophecy isn't foretold for any undead, however specifically an undead who escaped the undead asylum. And seeing that the character is from Lordran, it's clear that he ventured to the undead asylum to fulfill this prophecy. It's also vital to point out that this saying came from the neighbouring land of Lordran, where he came from, something that we will discuss shortly with another character who hails from the same location. This starting area isn't just a great introduction to your mission, but it also acts out as a tutorial of sorts in its own unique way. You get an introduction to the basic mechanics from the corpse having the white light on its body representing an item, notes left outside your cell that briefly go over the simple movements, and these movements are then up to you to perform when you come across some regular enemies. And the Estus flasks that Oscar gifts you, the health mechanic that you will intuitively learn to use sparingly, only drinking to maximize its efficiency. All these fundamentals are shown, not told. The designers trust you enough to figure things out for yourself and not baby you through how to fight the best or when to roll through extensive and dragged out tutorial sections that go through everything step by step. Maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. However, it wouldn't be a bad idea to hone thy art before your pilgrimage. I'll attacketh thee, and at the right timing you should parry. Ah, excellent. That was 3 parries in a row. Now, when I attack, I want you to roll it 5 times, then hit me with a counter attack. And this brings me back to what I originally said about the combat. Everything is your fault. It was entirely my fault that I went through the first entire playthrough without running once. But regardless of how easy you may now find the Asylum Demon to be, that first ever victory felt extremely gratifying and felt really deserved. There was no one helping me, no one telling me the boss's weakness or his moveset. This introduction sets up the tone for the rest of the journey and the themes of this game so goddamn perfectly. You're in a desolate and broken world, but you can represent hope and change. There will be challenges along the path and you will mess up and you will press B and roll off a cliff or get killed by a boss that was only 1 hit away. But you deserve these failures, you deserve every single misstep just as much as your victories. And as soon as you start taking accountability for your actions, face the unknown with optimism instead of fear, and you don't brush something off as unachievable or too hard and keep bouncing back after your failures, you will succeed. Does this sound familiar? It's your life. It's your life, my guy. You can see why this game means so much to people based on these themes alone. If every single game is a breeze from start to finish and holds your penis while you pee and barely offers any challenge, threats, or pain or despair, it's subconsciously telling you that life should be like this as well. I mean, I'm not saying that all games should have to be Souls-like or have no difficulty level, but I do think that we benefit from a challenge that this game provides. However, challenging and difficulty aren't the sole reason why this game is a masterpiece. We have only just left the Undead Asylum, because if you figure out that you jump attack the Asylum Demon, nearly half its health is gone from the start. Woohoo! And we have our whole journey ahead of us. After getting carried away to a random area by some giant crow who we will touch on later on, you arrive at Firelink Shrine for the first time, which serves as the game's hub area in a way, and it feels quite relieving that you stumble across some more normal looking and sounding people.
There are actually 2 bells of awakening.
Ah, so did Oscar not know about this, or did he not tell us? But there's something else that Souls-like games love to do that not a lot of players could be used to. Making the choice to keep a conversation going with any NPC by just continuously pressing talk. For example, there's some guy in the hub area that asks you to f*** off. However, when you continue to talk to him, he reiterates he wanted you to piss off, but not in a mean way. Then if you keep talking to him, he starts to like you and lets you join his covenant. I do feel that Dark Souls 2 did conversations the best out of the Dark Souls franchise. However, all of the Dark Souls games did this extremely well in their own regards. Yet again, the game trusts you to get as much information from everyone as possible, and through this you're able to understand more about your mission, or more about the character being spoken to, or pretty much how everyone has given up. And just a side note, I love how this game throws doubt at you, implying, hey dude, this game's hard, just stop trying. I know I did, just turn off your console, play some Ubisoft game, there's no point, just leave. This is hard, I haven't even gotten past the Capra Demon. And this is making you want to prove them wrong. Similar, yet again, to real life. It's a great and subtle way to instill determination within anyone. When you make your way down to the lower levels, you will come across Anastasia, the Firekeeper of Firelink Shrine. Firekeepers are mortal manifestations of the bonfires they keep. Their souls are gnawed for infinite humanity, and it's clear that this isn't something Anastasia enjoys. She's had her tongue chopped off to limit her complaining, but we will return to Anastasia. Sorry. I mean, we'll just leave her here for now. If this is your first time in Firelink Shrine, you'll probably head up the mountains to the big bridge to continue your journey. However, for any returning player, you'll head straight into the graveyard behind the shrine, run around and remember exactly where a totally normal and not overpowered two-handed sword is located. Further along your quest, you'll notice your second boss fight is another demon. And this demon might seem nothing more than just a roadblock like the Asylum Demon. However, when we go back to what I previously said about the Witch of Izalith turning the occupants of Blighttown into demons, you ask yourself what a demon is doing all the way over here, or even all the way at the Undead Asylum. It's then that you realize they must have been placed there to halt your journey. After all, the Taurus demon blocks the way to the first Bell of Awakening, then the Capra demon blocks your way to the second Bell of Awakening. And if we go back to the Undead Asylum, the Asylum demon can be seen above the tower before it even drops down, making sure that no undead even makes it out alive, which could be the reason Oscar wasn't able to make it out. A lot of players speculate on this being the case, however I'm extremely adamant that this is not the case, and he simply came back to the Undead Asylum to find you before he went hollow. But regardless, the design of this boss placement is intentional and calculated, whereas in a lot of other games, bosses are just seen at the end of every level out of convenience with no real backing. After this, however, you'll come across a unique NPC who is gazing at the sun. Bye Solaire of Astora, the same neighbouring land that Oscar hails from. One of the reasons why Bye Solaire is such a beloved character in the Dark Souls franchise among the community is because he represents a contrast to the other characters in the game, who are often grim and cynical. Solaire's unwavering optimism and determination to complete his quest even in the face of insurmountable odds is a breath of fresh air in a world filled with despair and hopelessness. He also has a strong willingness to help you or other players throughout this journey. Solaire encounters other players and offers them assistance and guidance. He even has his own unique gesture, the gesture becoming iconic among many players of the game. What's interesting about what Solaire says to you is that he became undead to pursue this goal. Coming from the same location as Oscar, many people from Lordran could have done the same thing. Perhaps Oscar deliberately became undead as well. However, even if their motivations for coming to Lordran may have been similar, their upbringings were wildly different from one another, and this difference is spotted in the descriptions of their shield. This is an important descriptive section of Oscar's shield. Shield of a nameless knight, likely a high-ranked knight of Astora. And here's a segment from Solaire's shield, decorated with a holy symbol, but Solaire illustrated himself, and it has no divine powers of its own. As it turns out, Solaire's incredible prowess is a product of his own training and nothing more. This crucial difference between these two formidable warriors are equally as impressive. Oscar is a high-ranking individual from his land, and Solaire is self-taught in such a commendable way that he's managed to make it all the way out here, travel with us throughout our journey, and sometimes completely alone and without hollowing. Something a high-ranking individual was not able to do. I mean, no shade to Oscar, but I mean, the main takeaways from Solaire, beside him being a G, is that he's a member of the Warrior of Sunlight's Covenant, a covenant created by himself that seeks to bring light and hope to the realm of Lordran. He's also an adherent to the Lord of Sunlight's Gwyn. I won't deny the theories that Solaire is a son of Gwyn, but I mean, I don't know, man. It just doesn't have a lot of backing that would make me talk about it. However, it's important to differentiate adherence from worship, because he never once praises Gwyn himself. Rather, he praises the sun. It's important to point out that Solaire is on a completely different quest compared to us, or the other humans / hollow that inhabit Lordran, a quest that's entirely his own. He wants to find his very own sun, and it's strange because, I mean, he's looking right at one. So why is it so important? Well, instead of asking why, let's first ask how. How is there even a sun in the sky? I thought the first flame was on Earth, not in space. But if what I said about history is true, there shouldn't even be a space for a ball of gas to reside in this world. The concept gets even more strange when you realize that the sun doesn't even reach places like the Darkroot Basin. So is the sun an illusion made by Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, or simply a manifestation of the first flame, which Dark Souls 3 seems to imply? This leads me to think that Solaire wishes to create his very own sun. We already know that his formidable miracle user, which fittingly uses the attribute of faith. So perhaps Solaire wishes to find a sun miracle so he can cast his very own sun? I'm not confident in this theory at all, but like I said, one of the best things about Dark Souls is these types of discussions. So at any point, if you have a better theory on what anything could mean with anything I say in this video, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. But yeah, the sun could be the illusion of someone else entirely, which we will discuss later on in this video when we get to Anor Londo. However, all we know now is Knight Solaire is a bro of the highest caliber, and he's willing to help us with select bosses along the way. Another great aspect of this game that you will come to find out is the interconnectedness of the levels. You will eventually come across a ladder that you'll be able to kick down, leading to the bonfire in between Firelink Shrine and the Taurus Demon, one that you've previously visited, making sure that travel becomes a lot easier and quicker without needing a fast travel mechanic. And later on, when you make it to the Undead Parish, the location of the very first Bell of Awakening, you can take a long and eerie elevator ride down into the unknown, and when you make it to the bottom, you take in your surroundings and you'll notice that you have just traveled to the Firelink Shrine, the starting location. You're now able to seamlessly travel between the end of the road and the start of your journey in one short elevator ride. This aspect of the experience was done so perfectly and is continuously executed within all of the FromSoft games. You've just been rewarded for continuing your journey in a way that not a lot of other games are able to capture. In fact, not even in a way that the future Dark Souls games are able to capture with the inclusion of fast travel from the very start. I'll admit, if you prefer just having fast travel right off the bat, that's a fine opinion to have. But I honestly feel that Dark Souls only implemented it when you needed it and makes you appreciate the map design a whole lot more. I mean, I can map out Dark Souls 1's entire map with my eyes closed at this point, but I can't say the same for Dark Souls 2 or 3, at least not at the same level. And it could be a strong aspect that Dark Souls 1 has over the other games: memorability. But before you head to the next boss fight, a mini hub area can be found across a bridge and down some stairs where an extremely valuable blacksmith is located. Andre of Astora. Again? Wait, why is every pair of nuts from Astora? Goddamn. This guy is another undead from Astora, and with him, you're now able to finally upgrade your gear. And although you'd be able to buy a weapon and armor upgrading kit yourself, he will also be able to ascend your weapons into elemental types, such as fire or lightning, and sell you important tools early on, such as Titanite shards, that you're able to upgrade your gear with if you don't have enough. This dude is a huge help, and he's one of the only returning characters in Dark Souls 3. Notably, Andre is the only character in the game with facial animations for talking, and there's a particularly good reason for this. He was supposed to be an extremely important character within Dark Souls, and in fact, I don't even need to explain it myself. I'll give you a quote from the main man Miyazaki himself, being asked about Andre of Astora and his importance in the game. He said, and I quote, "He was originally a descendant of Gwyn, whose task was to protect a door within the Firelink Shrine. In the end, he was going to push aside the goddess statue to let the player progress, but as development progressed, he became just a simple blacksmith." So yeah, there's an alternate universe where Andre, the now simple but helpful blacksmith, was once related to Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. There's not much more to go on with this character, but it's extremely important for you to take the time to upgrade your weapons to at least +5 before taking on the next boss, which is in the church right across from the bridge of this location. Your very first duo boss fight. Now, FromSoft love duos, and FromSoft fans can love duos, but at times would rather a machete to the bum crack. This will be your first truly challenging duo boss fight, unless... Alright, Solaire, you said you wanted to help me out on the journey, so I decided to summon you here today to... However, whatever your opinions of duos are, it's my honest opinion that Dark Souls 1 does this the best. I feel that they're the most balanced duo boss fights out of any of their games. Each one requires calculations and baiting. You can't just rush in when one's open, you need to be aware of what the other one's doing or what it's about to do. However, nothing about them is unfair or cheap. At the start of this boss fight, it looks like there's just one boss, and during this period of the fight, it's relatively easy. You must take out as much health as possible before the second boss comes along, and when the second boss does indeed come along, the whole dynamic of the boss fight is dramatically shifted. Now you need to be careful. One may spew fire, and out of that fire, one could jump out of the fire with an axe slam attack. Defeating these two is enormously rewarding. And I mean, of course, these bosses are going to be hard. They're blocking your path to ringing the bell of awakening. Another piece of visual storytelling that often goes unnoticed is the choice of gargoyles. Historically, gargoyles are simply used as water spouts designed to throw rainwater from the outside wall of a building. Derived from the French gargoyle, I think gargoyle? Many scholars consider gargoyles to be spiritual protectors of many churches, scaring off evil spirits, such as the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. It's important to note out that this is a church, and a lot of people have noticed the similarities between the Undead Burg and Nuevo San Juan Parangaracuretos. Which was, funnily enough, a church buried underneath ash and lava. Another real-world detail that could relate to what's underneath Blighttown. Attention to detail has never been more subtle yet so impressive with FromSoft games. But before we go too far ahead of ourselves, we have a bell to ring. Awesome. Nothing happened. I mean, I gotta be honest, ringing the first bell, regardless of which one you go for, is anticlimactic. However, something or someone does mysteriously appear back down the ladder, seemingly out of thin air after this bell was rung. And that is Oswald of Carim, who can request absolution for all sins, including murdering non-hollow NPCs and abandoning your covenants. There are many things that are strange about this man, aside from just his pose. Firstly, when he talks about absolving your sins, he starts to laugh at the end of the conversation like it's a joke. I mean, this is entirely a subjective note, but imagine if you were confessing your sins to a priest and they laughed. It would make you question their faith to a certain extent. However, the second thing I want to bring up is, did he follow us, or was he always here? Did us ringing the bell grant us to perceive him? And finally, Oswald is a worshipper of Velka, the goddess of sin, and according to the lore, her weapons were occult infused, meaning these weapons are meant to kill gods. Furthermore, crows are a symbol of Velka, which we will get to pretty soon. And seeing as a crow picked you up from the asylum, inevitably to wind up facing some gods down the track, this has led a lot of fans on the web to speculate Velka is wishing you to become the Dark Lord. This is further influenced by Oswald popping up right after ringing the bell in the parish. It does make sense that the crow picking you up would mean a lot more to the story than a simple mode of transport to and from the asylum, because why would the asylum demon be placed there to stop you from leaving, while a crow is there to help you leave? I want to touch on Velka a bit more later on in this video. However, the second bell of awakening must be rung. But before we go and do that, I want to go to the Darkroot Garden and Darkroot Basin. Andre's pet, I suppose? So these beings right here are Titanite demons, born from a Titanite slab, and the Titanite slab just happened to be in that very room when it happened. However, that doesn't explain the missing leg and missing head from all of these creatures. I mean, not just this one. These creatures pose a threat, especially if you stroll down into this room early game. But regardless, if you ran straight past it or chose to battle it, you'll inevitably make it to the Darkroot Garden. This place for the first time while playing this game provides a completely different landscape and tone from the Undead Parish or other areas previously explored. For one, this place is perpetually dark, which adds to the gloomy atmosphere, and when you start to venture further down the path, you'll come across a strange shrubbery being that pops out and proved to be a little piece of and it even teaches you through the environment to not trust everything that seems too good to be true. I mean, I did mention that I wouldn't touch on the DLCs of these games as much, however, the Artorias of the Abyss DLC is extremely important when it comes to this area. With this DLC, you venture 200 years into the past to a location location that no longer exists, the lost land of Oolacile. And when you walk around both the land of Oolacile and the Darkroot area, you'll notice that Oolacile is the Darkroot in the past. There are many landmarks that make this obvious, however there's a lot more factors that go unnoticed. One big one is without the guidance of Oolacile's magic, the scarecrow creatures became feral and turned into these green shrubbery motherfuckers. This land also has a lot of connections to Seath the Scaleless. Venturing deeper into the basin, you'll come across large crystal golems that are the creations of Seath himself. These golems could have been ordered to capture the maiden who will let you reach the lands of Oolacile, as a golden golem has successfully done so. Seath has managed to create many creatures, both successfully and unsuccessfully. However, one creation is found here, and that is the Moonlight Butterfly. This boss fight plays out extremely differently compared to the other bosses, and its attack patterns are all orchestrated for you to run, roll, and evade away from its spellcasting, and only after a series of attacks it comes down to rest on the bridge for you to be able to start attacking it. If you come across this boss later in the game, your massive health bar as well as the Estus flasks you've accumulated can make this boss fight pretty easy. Some say the easiest in the game, as there's a lot of room for error. However, earlier on, let's just say under level 20, this boss requires a lot of calculations and pattern recognitions for those that aren't spellcasters themselves. This boss is optional, however it leads to another deceased blacksmith, possibly from the lands of Astora or a friend of Andre. He has an important ember that you are able to use to upgrade your weapons, and well, I mean, this whole area is generally and widely regarded as optional aside from the magically sealed door at the start of this area, as you don't even need to venture here to complete the base game. But that being said, there is a lot of important lore here that is crucial to understanding the current and forgotten history of these lands. Eventually you'll come across a tower that leads to the Undead Burg, granting an ease of travel between these locations. However, this shortcut itself isn't what I want to focus on, rather what's inside this tower, locked away, not to be confused with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Havel the Rock. Havel's weapon of choice is an everlasting dragon tooth, coupled with his bulky fat rolling inducing armor. He looks pretty badass, however his backstory is quite tragic to say the least, and this also ties back into Seath the Scaleless. Havel not only despised magic, but despised the dragons, and since Seath the Scaleless is a dragon using magic, Havel could never trust Seath. And even though he was once a loyal follower and friend of Gwyn, Gwyn decided that it was just best to lock Havel away in this dungeon where he was left to slowly go insane and turn hollow. That is the short of it, and even with that, it's not hard to feel sorry for this hunk of meat. It doesn't stop people from speculating that this person may not be the real Havel or that Gwyn was never the one to lock him away, but what I failed to wrap my head around is that he wields this giant ass friggin' everlasting dragon tooth and never once thought to break down the wooden door. This fact has confused many people in the community, however it's actually been debunked. One Reddit user actually stated that the door itself was locked. Now we are able to fight the Capra demon and continue our pilgrimage to the second bell of awakening. An interesting theory that I've read online to do with this area that the Capra demon resides in is that all the undead wielding torches drove the Capra demon away, seeing as the Capra demon is weak to fire. However, even if the Capra demon wasn't weak to fire, he's still one of the easiest bosses to come across in this game. The dogs and tight compact boss arena do make it difficult for first timers, but once the puppies are taken care of, this boss doesn't seem to have a health bar at all. Regardless of how easy this boss is, this dude has one of the coolest designs in the series, wielding two great machetes with a boar or gargoyle helmet. This guy is criminally underrated for how badass he looks, and I do wish that he was a more integral part of the story, or even returned in one way or another in the future games. Maybe became just a little bit more of a challenge, because his looks do not justify the difficulty. The Capra Demon upon defeat drops a key to the depths, and reading the description of this item will give you a fairly good idea of what you're getting yourself into. Those banished from the undead burg eke out their existence in the depths, a damp lair with no trace of sunlight. Nearly half of the depths form a perilous flooded labyrinth. Going through these depths, which comprise of a large dark sewer system, is the primary and main way to reach Blighttown, although technically if you pick the master key during the character creation phase, this whole area including the Capra Demon becomes optional, but this is considered the conventional way to head. Aside from the hollows and dogs previously fought, the cooks stand out in this area and have an interesting backstory. This whole area was used to discard the unwanted in the land of Lordran, and when people became sick or hungry, the butchers created a meal out of their flesh. A lot of fans theorized that when they continuously discarded the unwanted meats from the humans down into the hole behind the butcher, the rat that ate it turned into a giant, since the rat was actually eating a large amount of humanity and the dark sign. This also leads you to realize why rats do have humanity at random drops, because, I mean, they eat people. Regardless if you knew this fact or not, it never fails to be disturbing. Venturing deeper and deeper into this area, you'll come across your first basilisk, which looks like a lizard toad aneurysm that makes a return to Elden Ring later on. These abominations look quite weak at first, but when they fart in your face and kill you instantly, you awaken with half of your usual health. This by itself is absolutely infuriating for any player to experience, especially on your first playthrough if you don't know how to cure it. This may seem easy to do, and in theory it kind of is, granted you have enough of the souls to purchase a purging stone from the Moss Lady. However, this could be a point where you have to restart your entire save. You see, NPCs are crucial in this game, and if you're someone who's careless enough to assume that everyone's a hostile, you've screwed yourself in the long run, and Miyazaki does not care. If you rang the first bell of awakening and attacked Oswald when you made it down the ladders assuming that he was hostile, and then later got spooked by the undead Moss Lady merchant and hit her as well, there is no way that you can get a purging stone without sucking it up and beating the depths and Blighttown, then travelling to the Ash Lake for a 10% chance of it dropping from the Man-Eater shells. This is where a lot of people would suck it up and restart their entire save if it sounds like a better option than going through hell and back just to get to normal health again. And in fact, there are a lot of choices later on that can lead you to restart your save, such as killing another important NPC or investing all of your souls into a useless attribute that is resistance, because there's no way to respec your points in the first Dark Souls game. However, I want to point something out, something that you might not have known. In the day 1 release, Curse actually acted wildly different to how it does now, and we should be extremely grateful that it has been patched. The Curse effect used to be stackable, leaving you with at times only an 1/8 of your health. Yeah, so yeah, if you've managed to make it through this unforgiving area and unlock shortcuts, you'll again appreciate the interconnectedness of the level design, because the trek to the boss becomes extremely easy in this pretty difficult area, and the boss itself is also extremely easy. The Gaping Dragon is another spectacularly designed boss that doesn't live up to its looks. Now don't get me wrong, every single time this boss makes it out of the sewer in the cutscene, I can't help but think how goddamn awesome it looks. The rows upon rows of teeth that appear outside the long slit down the dragon's stomach, coupled with the sunless and depressed atmosphere, this could well be the coolest designed boss in the entire game. This dragon is known to be a twisted version of the everlasting dragons that previously ruled the world. A hungry monster that is nothing more than a shell of its former greatness, now a bottom feeder at the bottom of the sewers, feasting on whatever comes its way. The Gaping Dragon's movesets are pretty easy to get the hang of, as the only moves you need to watch out for are its jumping attack when its spine twists upward and reveals all its teeth, and the cheap AoE running attack. I say cheap because I personally feel that rolling, running, or sitting down just fucking sitting down, coupled with an AoE that's just its entire body, is a bit of a low effort way of making a boss harder. However, this boss is kind of a pushover, which is quite upsetting. And you're also able to buddy up with Solaire to take down this beast, which is overkill, but exciting nevertheless. And some say that this beast was called the Tight Dragon before you and Solaire came along. Out of the many unfortunate souls that were consumed by this giant beast, one of them had the key to Blighttown, which the Gaping Dragon drops, and this will be the last trek you'll make to ring the final bell of awakening. But before that, you'll come across a mysterious merchant called Domhnall of Zena, who greets you with a Welsh greeting, Aishmai. I hope I said that right, and overall seems very cheerful and nice. However, some members of the community have dubbed this charming gentleman as Domhnall the Trickster. Even though there's nothing bad that he does in the game, in fact he can be seen as an unassuming merchant. However, something he does sell will certainly deceive you. Crystal weapons. The first time I came across these crystal weapons, I thought nothing of it. I thought, look at that damage. Hey, that looks pretty good. So I purchased a sword and went on my merry way. After a few satisfying moments, I was like, why haven't I used a crystal weapon before? These are the shit. Then after a few more satisfying moments, it broke extremely quick. I thought, wow, that's strange. But you want to know what's even more strange? You can't repair them. You can't repair them. You can only upgrade them, and then you can use them again, but only for a noticeably short amount of time again. This may have been extremely annoying in the moment, however, in hindsight, I am so grateful I found this out the easy way instead of the hard way. You see, later on in the adventure, you'll come across crystal upgrades which can be used to upgrade your gear. Now, if I saw this and later on decided to upgrade my Zweihander to a crystal Zweihander, then I would have uninstalled this game and slammed my head across my keyboard. You cannot undo this. Once it's crystal, there's no going back. It makes me wonder why the developers put this mechanic into the game in the first place, because it makes no sense. Why have something that's so good for a good few minutes and then render it completely useless? So Domhnall is a trickster for having the balls to even sell this nasty stuff to me. But what got people's eyebrows to raise is the Designworks interview about Dark Souls 1, where Hiroshi Nakamura, someone who worked on the game, asked about the outfit that Domhnall was wearing to Miyazaki, where he called it the Trickster outfit, to which Miyazaki, the lead director of the game, simply stated, yes, a character like that is actually very easy to fit into the game. You can essentially place him anywhere and move him about wherever you want. Notice something strange about his reply? Miyazaki somewhat dismissed what Nakamura said. Miyazaki somewhat dismissed what he just said and indirectly answered his question by not addressing the trickster aspect of his clothing. This has led a lot of people to come up with theories that this character is not who he seems. However, I want to leave it at that since I'm not that confident with any of these theories. I've read a lot and none seem to convince me strongly. However, if you have any reasons why he may be a trickster, be sure to give me your insights in the comments below, as like I've said, I'm open to everything. What we do know about Domhnall for certain, however, is his helmet is based off of Henry VIII's helmet, who was in fact half Welsh. Henry did have 6 wives, so you could also say that Domhnall was a top G, however he killed 2 of them, so make of that what you will. But now, Blighttown is next, and this area is a horror to endure for any first timer playing this game, for 2 main reasons. The first is it's hard, and the second is the original Xbox 360 and PS3 versions suffered from extreme frame rate issues in this area, especially when looking down at the ground, and this problem persisted until I got near the end of Blighttown, which was a major kick in the balls for my experience. However, the remastered version does fix this issue, and if you played the original on the PC, you wouldn't have run into this issue with the help of mods. But even now that it does perform well, most players will still use the shortcut via the Valley of Drakes to escape this nightmare-fueled pile of swamp shit. For one, this area is infested with toxic spitting enemies that can drain the player's health over time, and unlike poison, which has a duration of 3 minutes, toxic has a duration of 10 minutes if untreated, and is twice as deadly. And these enemies are often in hard to reach areas, which just adds to the difficulty. Secondly, the geography of this area is pretty complex, with narrow, sometimes moving walkways, vertical drops, and hidden paths that can be easy to miss. You can and will fall off the edge, and if it's not a misstep, these infested barbarians will knock you off for you. And they're randomly placed around every nook and cranny to ensure that you won't ever be alone. I will admit this area does calm down quite a bit when you reach the first bonfire next to the poison lake, and where you will fight Quelaag, but while the hell lasts, this can be one of the most infuriating sections of any Souls game to date. But before making your way to Quelaag's domain, you'll be invaded by a man-eater Mildred, one of the most iconic invaders in Dark Souls 1. She's a cannibalistic woman, obviously, wearing a sack over her head and wielding a butcher knife. She has a wooden plank shield, who is not easy at all. But once you're able to defeat her, she's able to be summoned to help you in your fight against the Chaos Witch Quelaag. Quite possibly the most annoying aspect about this boss fight is that you need to carry purple moss clumps to cure yourself of poison, because you'll need to trek through a poisonous swamp to get to her in the first place. And be careful about projectiles thrown by these cum dumpsters. But when it comes to entering the fog wall and beginning the battle, I wouldn't say that Quelaag is a hard boss. However, she's not easy either. Her moveset consists of fire slashes and fire stabs. Meanwhile, her parasite aids her in battle. The spider-like creature can regurgitate lava, either with a lava rush, where the creature leaps towards you, spitting lava simultaneously, or the creature performs a lava breath move, where Quelaag pats the spider's head ever so gently and the spider lava on the ground, you know what I'm saying? Leaving it there to just be a hurdle and catch you if you're not careful. The most dangerous move that she can perform is when Quelaag bends forward and reaches down the spider's head and performs an AoE attack. This does have a surprisingly broad range, but can easily be avoided. Overall, this is still a very, very memorable boss fight, and the game never fails to surprise you with the creativity behind the designs. This boss is the daughter of the Witch of Izalith, like I mentioned at the start of this video, and failed to escape from the chaotic flame that her mother created. Quelaag and her family were visibly corrupted by this flame. Quelaag is referred to as the perfect creation of chaos, and the relationship between her and the parasite that's grown from her is kinda kinky. They work well together like two voluptuous pairs of tenacious friends. Quelaag might seem like another roadblock on the path to the second Bell of Awakening, however, she needs us, the undead travelers, to come. That is because she needs our humanity to aid her sister, the Fair Lady, who you will find past a fog wall after defeating Quelaag. Listening to the Fair Lady speak is extremely depressing, as it's clear that she's no threat, seeing as she's lost all of her senses after the cursed recreation of the flame. But she remains calm and caring. She assumes that you, the player, are in fact Quelaag and asks for you to take care of yourself. It's clear to see that the sister's transformation was not as forgiving as Quelaag, as she can be heard sobbing in pain due to the egg sacs forming around her body. And for some reason, if you decide to kill her, you will not only not have a bonfire here anymore, but her servant will let out a blood-curdling screech. You can also find another sister of Quelaag, Quelaag, who resides in Lower Blighttown, just outside the sister's domain. To have her appear, you must have a pyromancy flame at +10 or higher. However, you can also just summon a friend who has +10 pyromancy, which is a pleasant thing for the developers to add for those not interested in pyromancy. When her mother attempted to recreate the first flame, Quelaag was able to escape without suffering any mutations at all. However, she seems to be suffering from something else entirely, survivor's guilt, and she asks you to put her family out of their misery. The servant speaks to you about Quelaag, dubbing her the Lost Quelaag, stating that she has never been seen by anyone since the tragic events that mutated her family. So it's here that we realize that she has spent the last centuries, millennia, so close yet so far from her brothers and sisters. Damn, dude, that's kinda sad. Well, anyway, we're off to Zen's fortress, baby! Woo! Oh, fuck yeah! Fuck Quelaag's domain!
Was it you who
Wait, what?
rang the
What happened to the...
bell of awakening?
It appears that some ableists decided to kill a mute girl for her Firekeeper soul. At her body you're able to retrieve a black eye which keeps constant watch on Anor Londo, the place you're heading to next. And this is attached to the killer of whoever killed this Firekeeper. But it looks like King Seeker Frampt not only could hear both bells, but knows that we were the ones to do it. Reading the description of the covetous silver serpent ring gives you the best idea of who these primordial serpents may be. A snake that could have been but never was a dragon. These primordial serpents are a crucial part of the Dark Souls story, and more specifically the ending, so I'll come back to them later. However, let's just focus now on what Frampt has to say to you. He gets straight to the point and asks you to succeed the Lord Gwyn and link the fire to undo the curse of the undead. You must visit Anor Londo and acquire the Lord Vessel by going through Zen's Fortress, a deadly house of traps. Now, Zen's Fortress is a hell to go through. Not a lot of games do level engineering quite like From Software. The layout of this fortress on your first journey can be extremely complex, with many narrow corridors and bridges coupled with traps and pitfalls, and yeah, if you do manage to fall off the bridge and end up surviving and make it to the bottom of the fortress, you'll be greeted by 4 ever so sexy Titanite demons. There is a notable jump in toughness with these enemies as well, even coming straight from Blighttown. There are 2 main types of lizard humanoids who will be blocking your path. One with a shield and spear, and one that throws lightning bolts your way in very, very inconvenient situations. If it isn't the enemies that kill you on your first run, it will most certainly be the environment, the hardest of which are either the swinging axes placed awkwardly between enemies and constantly hurling lightning bolts your way, and pressure plates sending waves of arrows your way. You can use these arrows to your advantage, however, by timing the trigger to only occur when the lizards are in its line of fire, and you will only understand the best route to take of this fortress after trial and error. And even when you reach the very top, there are some people who have no idea that there's a bonfire at the top. I only accidentally discovered the bonfire on my second or third playthrough because there was a note on the ground that read bonfire ahead. However, being tricked too many times to count and into jumping off a cliff, I was like, yeah, f*** off, that's bullshit. Bonfire ahead, yeah. So I hesitated to believe it. But however, I peeked over the edge to find a small ledge that you could nudge to, and lo and behold, there's a bonfire. I was never happier and madder at the same time. I can't count how many times I went all the way from the bottom of Zen's Fortress to fight the boss at the top. Once you reach this bonfire, there is a huge sigh of relief. However, after exploring further, you can come across a key that unlocks a cage that you can take to and from the very start of Zen's Fortress. Now this is level design done right. And why does From Software and From Software only make this feel so damn gratifying every single time? The long and short of it is, this fortress serves as a test for those seeking to enter the City of the Gods. Heroes and warriors from various eras have attempted to reach Anor Londo by passing through Zen's Fortress, but only a few have been successful. One such hero is Black Iron Tarkus, a boss that can be summoned against the average enemy. He is a knight from Berenik. He's one of the longest surviving knights to attempt to cure the curse of the undead and fulfill the prophecy. It's heavily implied that he is the one of the few to have completed Zen's Fortress and traveled to Anor Londo, and the area is littered with the remains of other knights who were not so successful. It's theorized that he is the one who smashed the glass window in Anor Londo that leads players through the raft and paved the way for future undead to venture through Anor Londo. He later fell from the roof to his death, as his corpse, along with the Black Iron Set and the Black Iron Great Shield, can be found near the large painting in Anor Londo. Another character who attempted to pass through Zen's Fortress is Big Hat Logan, a scholar of the Soul Arts and a member of the Vinheim Dragon School. In his attempt to reach Anor Londo, Logan ended up trapped in a cage in Zen's Fortress. Despite his great intelligence and magical abilities, Logan was forced to remain inside a cage until he was discovered by the player. We'll get to Big Hat Logan later on, as he plays a pretty important role, but for now we have the City of the Gods to head to. After defeating the hardest boss in the entire game, you get transported to Anor Londo by a flying... You know what, I'm just gonna get ChatGPT to draft a poem about these Batwing demons. Batwings, once a simple way to fly, but now they're known to make you die. Gone are the days of peaceful flight, now they stab and cause a terrible fight. We trusted in their wings, so big and so grand, but now they're the enemy, a treacherous band. We relied on you to help us cross, but now you're a menace at a terrible cost. Now that that beautiful piece of art is over, what does Anor Londo feel like to encounter for the very first time? Anor Londo is located high above the rest of the game world, surrounded by mountains and clouds, which helps add to its sense of grandeur and majesty. The architecture itself is known for its beautiful and ornate design with grand white stone buildings and intricate details. The city is also lit by the sun, creating a bright, ethereal atmosphere that contrasts with the dark, grim environments of the rest of the game. Apart from feeling entirely otherworldly, it has an initial feeling of peacefulness, and even after fighting the tough enemies located in this environment, there seems to be a sense of undisturbed serenity, in contrast to the danger and chaos of the rest of the game world. Visiting this place for the very first time really solidifies how much the landscapes vary and how talented these level designers are, and we've barely even scraped the surface, as this is considered halfway through your adventure. When you arrive at your first bonfire, you will cross paths with the Lady of the Darkling, who is also known as the Dark Moon Firekeeper. This bonfire's firekeeper. She wears the brass set armor to hide her hollowed form and help her hunt the guilty as the Dark Moon Blade. This suggests that she has connections to the Order of the Dark Moon Blades, a group of knights who are sworn to protect the gods and hunt down the guilty. The fact that she wields a parrying dagger may also suggest that she's originally from Carim, a city known for its skilled sword fighters and weaponsmiths. There are also several theories surrounding the Lady Darkling and her relationship with the other characters of the game. One theory is that she gets her humanity from Lautrec, a character who is found imprisoned in a cell in the Undead Church, who shares the same homeland of Carim. This theory suggests that Lautrec brings humanity to the Lady of the Darkling in Anor Londo to keep her alive, not too different from Quelaag bringing humanity to her sister, as the bonfire she attends receives extraordinarily little activity. Upon venturing deeper into Lordran, and the black eye begins to quiver, you will find out that Lautrec killed Anastasia, the firekeeper at Firelink Shrine, possibly to preserve the life of his mistress, the Lady of the Darkling. Or to keep it for himself, I mean, who knows, as firekeeper souls have a lot of humanity, but it's here that players tend to view Lautrec as a bad guy, in such a hypocritical way. After all, it's possible that during a playthrough you could be the one to kill a certain firekeeper, either the one at Quelaag's domain, possibly the one at Anor Londo, or even after reacquiring Anastasia's soul, you'll keep it for yourself. The value in them do make this extremely tempting, which I believe the game designers pulled off brilliantly, because there's no real consequence for killing a firekeeper, apart from just having one less bonfire to travel to, of course. This is just a game theory, however there's something else I promised that I would touch on in this area, and that something is Velka. There are connections between Velka and Anor Londo, and even slight connections between Velka and the firekeeper here. Painted World of Ariamis holds several items related to Velka, including the Dark Ember, which is used to hunt down the gods. Velka is connected to the Dark Moon Firekeeper in Anor Londo through her role as the judge and punisher of sinners, and if Lautrec killed Anastasia under the Lady of the Darkling's command, it would make them both just as guilty. However, it's here we remind ourselves about Oswald. After all, it's likely that he was the person who imprisoned Lautrec in the first place for previously killing a firekeeper. If Lautrec happened to escape, then quickly make up the souls to request absolution, is he set off scot-free? Well, he is, under Oswald's own rules. Does this mean that if he killed the firekeeper, then just requested absolution, and then we later kill him, are we the murderers, or in other words, the guilty in this situation? And why does Lautrec get imprisoned for being guilty while we get to request absolution whenever we so desire, no matter who we kill. I mean, we don't even need to request absolution. All of these flaws in Oswald's way of thinking make me think that he's most definitely not pure of heart, especially after what transpired here in New Londo. And Oswald's devotion to Valka could have been obscured. He could have simply profited from gullible people who give into the fear of an unforgiving god. This is where we ask ourselves, were Oswald's rules always around, or are they merely an invention? There's no doubt that his effects are extremely powerful, inarguably world-changing, as there's no other way to calm someone down for slicing off their nose than to request absolution. Perhaps these are the reasons that Valka chose to disobey Gwendolyn's order and infuse her weapons with god-killing properties to end the suffering of those who simply didn't monopolize on forgiveness and fear, by possibly attempting to overthrow the gods. A recent theory about Valka popularized on the Sinclair Lore YouTube channel is that Valka is one of the missing daughters of the Witch of Izalith. In Dark Souls 3, when you go to the statue of Valka, she is wearing a similar outfit that the Daughters of Chaos are wearing, and Valka's talisman directly says that it's made from her hair. And then we also know that the whip in Dark Souls 3 belonging to the daughter of the Witch of Izalith is fashioned from her black hair as well. Whether hair itself is a strong enough correlation or not, the theories presented within the Sinclair Lore podcast always get my mind buzzing on the possibilities. However, I'm never ever going to say that I'm 100% certain with any of the theories. Yet again, I need to remind you, Valka is a mysterious and influential character in the lore of Dark Souls that hasn't been given a lot of substantial lore, and you can never find her within any of the installments. So, I mean, here's to hoping that she pops up in Dark Souls 4, or if Dark Souls 4 ever comes out. Here's to hoping. Dark Sun Gwendolyn is an easily missable boss in Dark Souls, and it's strange that he's optional, seeing as he is the youngest child of Gwyn. He's in the hidden passage that can be found by taking the rotating staircase down to the Dark Moon Tomb, which is usually an empty room with just a statue of Gwyn. To enter Gwendolyn's covenant or trigger a boss fight with him, players must have the Dark Moon Seance Ring from the Catacombs, or have killed Guinevere. But if you do kill the illusory Guinevere later on, the Firekeeper previously mentioned will get super duper pissed and wants to have a little bit of a tussle with you. Gwendolyn is revealed to be a male who was raised as a female due to his associations with magic and the moon. He created an illusory version of his sister, Guinevere, to watch over Anor Londo after the gods abandoned the city. And there's also the theory that he created the illusory sun as well that shines over Anor Londo. However, this awe-inspiring place has fallen, and Gwendolyn is the only remaining god who wants to entice the player to relight the first flame and succeed Gwyn. And again, FromSoft, why do this again? This game is a damn masterpiece, okay? And with every criticism I give it, it will not sway my opinion. However, with all this hype, with the Dark Moon Gwendolyn, a literal god among men, is a weak pussy. This arena is unlike anything we've seen. I mean, it's fun, but it's painfully easy to beat him, often on your first try. I don't know, man. With all the talk about Dark Souls being the hardest game ever made, I'm starting to think I'm taking crazy pills, because although there's been slight challenges along the way, this whole journey has been a piece of piss. In fact, I think I could play this game with my eyes closed. What's going on? Did I set this game on easy mode?
Ashinwan no mayo wa Mushinaido.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm! Everybody stay calm! What's the procedure? Stay calm! Wait! My foot! My foot!
Nothing up until now will prepare you for this fight. Never have I ever been slapped in the face with a difficulty spike quite like this, and I'm not gonna lie, I had to stop playing the game for a good few months on my first playthrough. Even summoning Solaire to come and help me fight still proved to be a nightmare. My son bro got absolutely slapped by this duo. To add insult to injury, the boss's health bars increase when summoning an NPC to even out the fight. There are a few reasons why this fight has left such an everlasting impression on many players. The fight against Ornstein and Smough is unlike any other in this game, as the players must face two bosses at the same time. I mean, sure, you have fought the Bell Gargoyles, but they had the exact same moves. I mean, they were the exact same thing. Whereas Ornstein and Smough are wildly different in movesets and physicality. And no, I'm not fat shaming, it's just an observation. Which complement each other so damn well, it's infuriating. This adds an extra layer of difficulty as the player must divide their attention and resources between the two opponents. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Ornstein's speedy Gonzalez dash attack pissed me off. Not because it was fast, but because he'd get ready to charge and then start charging and then bump into something and then stand up and go, wait, what? Huh? Did I just hit my head? And then start charging full speed again with no warning whatsoever. And then Smough does a completely different charge attack as well. So you need to continuously position yourself behind the pillars to stop his plan of attack. Once I mastered this, I decided it was Ornstein who should die first.
Woohoo! Yeah, baby, that's what I'm talking about. That's what...
Oh. Sorry. Did I say I stopped playing the game for a good few months? Did I say I stopped playing the game for a good few months? Did I say... I'm not going to stretch this segment out, but I just want to let you know the first time that I encountered a second boss phase was in this game, and my small pea brain could not handle what was going on. I didn't understand. But yeah, I mean, look, but now I can appreciate this boss fight. For one, it's the art design. Both Ornstein and Smough have distinctive and memorable designs. Ornstein's like more of a slender and agile dragon slaying knight, and Smough is very bulky and heavily armored. They both fit the part, and the designers knew what they were doing, but the music was extremely memorable as well. It was so intense and dramatic, giving you a feeling of, yes, I can do it, and also a feeling of
Ashen one, bite to the pillow. I'm coming in dry.
If this was your first Dark Souls or FromSoft game in general, this is what people refer to when they say this game is hard. It's a common misconception that every single boss fight and area is hard for the sake of being hard, because that's just flat out wrong. Right now, you're fighting for the Lord Vessel in order to kill Gwyn, which he's entrusted these two warriors in protecting. That's a lot different from ringing a bell. These bosses have been entrusted with protecting everything that this world relies on to survive. Not to say that the other bosses later don't bear the same responsibility, but after many tries, many cries, and many controllers, you'll inevitably emerge victorious. And this feeling is one to just bask in. I remember the first time I defeated this boss, I just sat down the controller and I just felt like I did it. I actually did it. Like, this was something I thought that was just unachievable when I was a kid. It's a feeling often only captured by From Software, as I've said many times, but it just feels earned. It feels justified. Not only did you have to memorize the patterns, be smart about when to attack and when to back off, but you had to keep your cool and not do anything rash out of emotion. Drink a flask out of desperation because you haven't found the time. Go for an attack when you're pissed off that there hasn't been an opening for a while. You kept your cool and persevered. And what's more is when you make your way up to the elevator and enter the last room of this building,
now you're about to be rewarded
Okay.
with the greatest gift you could receive. Big old titties. You like titties?
you are given the Lord Vessel, which grants fast travel between all the major bonfires from any bonfire you rest at for the rest of this adventure. This gift that the developers gave us, and the timing of it is just simply perfect. I admit fast travel could have been nice at the start of the adventure, however this is just a sigh of relief, and probably the best reward for our demanding work up until now. This reward feels like a gift. What's interesting about this area, however, if you choose to attack Guinevere, there will be a short cutscene where Gwendolyn talks to you and says that your actions will not go unpunished. The entire city of Anor Londo plunges into darkness. You're now able to head back to the bonfire, and when you place the Lord Vessel at the altar, a beam of yellow light will shoot up into the sky and 3 golden gates will completely dissipate. Keep in mind, you've placed the Lord Vessel, but it needs to be activated with powerful souls. Seath the Scaleless holding a fragment of the Lord Soul located in the Duke's archives. The 4 Kings also holds a part of the Lord Soul who is located in the new Londo Ruins. Grave Lord Nito is holding the Soul of Death, who is located past the Catacombs and beyond the Tomb of the Giants. And finally, the Bed of Chaos is the holder of the Soul of Life, who is situated past Blighttown, Quelaag's domain, and inside the Demon Ruins. From here you can go whichever direction you please. I mean, the world is your oyster. Let's start with the Duke's Archives since we were just there. The Duke's Archives, also known as the Regal Archives, is located in the grand city of Anor Londo that you were just at, and you can see this building from the left of the first bonfire on the mountains. The Archives are home to Seath the Scaleless, a character who was granted the dukedom and the Archives themselves by Gwyn as a reward for his assistance in defeating the Everlasting Dragons. This whole building is a massive library fortress containing an extensive amount of knowledge, including numerous spells and magic relics which you, the player, can learn powerful spells from, obtain crystals and magic embers, and acquire weapons within the archives. The library is also home to the Chancellors, who are sorcerers who serve Seath and kidnap inhabitants of Lordran for his experiments. This could apply to the Golden Golem mentioned from the Darkroot Basin, seeing as Seath created these golems and has a fascination with the maidens. I mean, it's not very characteristic for a golem to not kill you, so the archives can contain the results of these experiments, one of which are the Pasakas, which can be found in the basement of the tower, who are snake-like creatures with a blue octopusy head. With a blue octopus head. These creatures used to be humans until they were subjected to Seath's experiments. This whole place is nothing more than a giant maze on your first playthrough and could easily be the most infuriating and difficult area for players, with enemies that are significantly buffed and deal a lot of damage being able to easily kill you in like 1 or 2 hits, and Chancellors just warp all over the place. The narrow hallways and tight spaces make it difficult to avoid these attacks, and the enemy placements do not make it easier. This place is damn challenging, but you can't deny it's goddamn beautiful. This is easily one of the best locations in the game, with a diverse range of enemies, beautiful scenery, and an interesting level design. The aesthetic is just so damn cool, with like winding staircases that rotate around with the use of a lever, and a massive library filled with bookshelves and staircases. It just gives this area a mystical, almost Hogwarts-like feeling that sets it apart from the other locations in the game. One of the most memorable moments in the Duke's Archives is what a lot of players call the Leap of Avalon, a risky jump that you can do while the staircases are in the middle of rotating that allows you to access the Avalon's crossbow. The Duke's Archives also serves as a prison, which you will shortly find out. Now, this is one of the coolest walks to a boss in this game. The more you walk through this narrow walkway, the more crystals you see forming on the walls, which just adds a strong atmosphere of mystery and danger. And when you finally make it out, you face off against Seath the Scaleless, but he defeats you instantly and places you inside his prison, with seemingly no way out until you decide to whack the guard and steal his key. When you make it out of your cell, a guard will sound the alarm and anger the Pasakas who we just talked about. If the player turns the alarm off, they will cease to be aggressive and return to their resting area. However, there are at least 2 Pasakas that are found in the lowest parts of the tower that are always passive and constantly crying with the voices of human women. These Pasakas are thought to be the handmaidens to the Princess Guinevere. Big Hat Logan makes a return here as well, and he can be found trapped at the bottom of this prison. You can set him free using the Archive Tower Giant Cell Key or after defeating Seath, but we will return to him very shortly. It's pretty straightforward leaving this area, and when you do leave and activate the bonfires, the trek to Seath the Scaleless is moderately easy. However, it's pretty cool. I really do like the design of the crystals and invisible walkways that you can walk across to get to him. Some players have found this boss to be relatively easy, while others have found it to be more challenging. The main thing you want to do before attacking him is to run up and destroy the crystal at the start of the fight. I'll now go over some of Seath's backstory again and piece together the puzzles on why the lack of challenge in this fight could be justified by the developers. Born an albino dragon without scales, Seath lacked the immortality possessed by other dragons, so out of jealousy and envy he betrayed his own kind and sided with Lord Gwyn in the war against the dragons. However, Seath's jealousy and desire for immortality continued to consume him, leading him to go pretty much insane in the pursuit of the Scales immortality. This may be the reason why he may not have been as strong as he once was. On an interesting note about the crystal we destroyed is that this was a primordial crystal which he was able to use to become an undead, granting him immortality. He inevitably dies, but Seath's corrupting magic lives on through its effect on characters such as Big Hat Logan. Let's return now to Big Hat Logan. If you set him free for the second time, you will find him studying Seath's books, not even recognizing who you are, and he gets enraged that you're interrupting his studies.
Who are you? Stay clear of my work. Curses upon you. How dare you disturb me?
Then for the final time, if you venture back to where you first fought Seath the Scaleless, he will be found hostile and trying to kill you, leading only one of you to make it out alive. Now there's a big debate on how this all happened and whether he hollowed or simply drove himself to insanity. However, I genuinely believe that he drove himself to insanity, and I'll provide my evidence on why. He desperately wanted to get into the Duke's archives as he was absolutely infatuated with it. Researching into sorceries and knowledge on Seath was all he cared about. It's possible and highly likely that he deliberately got himself imprisoned in Zen's fortress knowing that he would be transported to the Duke's archives, and as soon as you set him free, he says he will visit the archives. It's my impression that he started studying and learning all sorts of new information from the archive and learnt some bizarre and unsettling information that was better left hidden. He could have learnt about hidden histories, secret societies, mysterious spells that granted him with an infinite stream of information that his small, fragile, submissive, petite, breedable body could not handle. I do like the idea of this because I often ask myself what answers are inside the Duke's archives, but maybe the real problem is there'd be more questions. That's my opinion on how he went insane, at least. I think he simply couldn't sleep on the information he learnt. Perhaps he felt a sense of responsibility because he could have been a good guy, but in the end, whether it was due to insanity or hollowing, I do believe we did the right thing by putting him out of his misery. Now I think it's time that we visit the Catacombs, home to one of the easiest boss fights with 2 of the hardest boss treks in this whole entire game. The Catacombs can be accessed at any point in the game as it's right next to Firelink Shrine. I've noticed that there's pretty big robust evidence that the Undead Parish and Firelink Shrine was home to many people. So many people in fact that they ran out of room to bury their dead and had to build these catacombs to rest their loved ones in. Or maybe perhaps the dead located here were nothing more than puppets for the Grave Lord to use, or Pinwheel, I don't know, man. Venturing into these catacombs or any catacombs in the Dark Souls franchise and navigating its tricky environment is not easy on your first go. But what's worse is coming here at such a low level is one of the worst early game decisions that you could make. Something you could easily do I mean, everyone's done it. A lot of people say that it's tedious and time consuming with no fires to light the way and tough enemy skeletons that are pretty hard to defeat with their bullshit roly-poly move. This area is pretty unforgiving. However, I do like the vibe of this area. It's a unique contrast from Firelink Shrine. Activating certain paths and figuring out quick shortcuts to head to the boss in these catacombs are pretty enjoyable to do. I do like how the player is rewarded for figuring out the quickest route to Pinwheel. However, the hardest part about Pinwheel is most definitely getting to Pinwheel. The conventional way of getting to Pinwheel is infuriating as is. The rolling skeletons and self-destructing floating skulls. But my god, even going through the shortest routes, those wheel skeletons, even on a high level, can easily ram into you and one-shot you. These guys will make sure that you die at least a few times before getting to Pinwheel. And yeah, Pinwheel is a joke of a boss, which is quite sad because he's quite cool too. Pinwheel is described as a necromancer who is stealing or has stolen the power of Grave Lord Nito, the first of the dead. Pinwheel is known for ruling over the catacombs and for having 3 masks representing the child, the mother, and the father. What's interesting is there's a chance that all 3 are dropped by Pinwheel, and the first half of all of the item descriptions read the same. One of the 3 masks of the Pinwheel, the necromancer who stole the power of the Grave Lord and reigns over the catacombs. The second half of the descriptions all describe the wearer specifically, the father as valiant, the mother as kindly, and the child as naive. And when you drop down, it seems as if all 3 heads begin discussing on how to deal with this intruder. This is extremely creative to do for a boss fight, and just leave that up to the player to discuss why these heads were talking to each other. Players can obtain the right of kindling, a secret right that was passed down among clerics, that allows bonfires to be strengthened with kindling beyond what was once normal. There's one pretty big theory that includes his motivations being tied to the occult and the followers. Failed attempts to steal the power of the Grave Lord Nito, as there's a shield found on a corpse further on in the game of the Tomb of the Giants that tried to steal the power of the Grave Lord Nito. Perhaps Pinwheel was trying to take out the gods for the occult, or maybe he's doing it all for his own selfish intent, trying to restore whatever humanity he had before this transformation. It's said that this shield defends against divine weapons and more specifically lightning weapons, something Gwyn used against the dragon, so perhaps Pinwheel was once an especially important part of history and was fighting on the same side of Velka. Furthermore, every mask can be a rare drop from the Pinwheel servants in front of the Grave Lord Nito's tomb, which could be evidence that he's not done yet and he's still needing to send more of his troops inside. But apart from that, he may have lost most of his strength after merging his whole family into a single body by his own doing, maybe to save them, or perhaps someone else did this to him. Or maybe Pinwheel itself could be a completely different entity that used these 3 souls to grant itself more strength, as the mother increases health points, the child increases stamina, and the father increases equip load. Aside from other environmental factors you could find, such as bodies of the supposed parents and masks that look the same as the masks of Pinwheel, not a lot is actually known about the Pinwheel himself, or itself. But if you thought the Catacombs was infuriating, my god, you have something in store. In short, this for me is one of the most unfun locations in all of Dark Souls. I love every single location in this game, and I would often come back just for the fun of it, just to explore and see what I've missed out on. However, the only reason I come to the Tomb of the Giants is to beat Nito and then never return. This area is extremely difficult if you're not a caster or if you don't have the Sunlight Maggot hat. Being pitch black, this place is a complete nightmare. Constantly falling off cliffs that you can't see, the archers and skeleton dog abominations make this a drag. Eventually, just like the Catacombs, you will find the easiest and quickest path to make it out. But even then, this has to be one of the longest treks to any boss fight in the whole franchise, apart from Dark Souls 2. But unlike Pinwheel, when you finally make it to Nito, he's unfortunately not a piece of cake, making you travel the whole route all over again. I understand the argument a lot of players make in terms of them enjoying it, and even though I couldn't disagree more, I'll cast my bias aside and play devil's advocate. This area does reward exploration, and the feeling of dread and despair which the Dark Souls games try to capture in this area succeeds very well. A lot of people also like the lore of the area and the lore of Gravelord Nito, and I can't argue about the lore being extremely interesting. However, I find the core gameplay of this area and the boss fight to be extremely lackluster and even cheap in a way. For one, you'll take fall damage right at the very start of the fight to get interrupted while using healing items by the rage-inducing scream that is followed by a sword coming out of the ground and up into your asshole. When you're all healed and ready to go, you're bound to be stun-locked by skeletons. I'll say this for many boss fights I come across. However, if the hardest part about the boss is not the boss, it's a bad boss. This is the only boss in the game that I have to say is just a bad boss design. Regardless of how cool this character is and his backstory is, like, I understand he's got the soul of death and is likely the first being to experience death, granting him the abilities of necromancy. It still feels so underwhelming that when you fight him away from the other skeletons, he's a piece of piss. His moves are easy to predict and he gets mad and farts off an AoE attack when things aren't going his own way that kills his own minions and not me. It still feels extremely underwhelming that when you fight him away from the other skeletons, it might sound like I'm being overly negative, however I just can't lie to myself. I just didn't enjoy this guy. And like I said, the whole area I just didn't enjoy. This doesn't by any means dismiss the fact that Gravelord Nito is a significant character in the game. He's a really important figure in the world, and Nito was actually created as the boss for the prototype map of this game. His design actually went through several iterations before it was finalized, and it's clear that there's a lot of care that went into his creation. Like, I can see that. The title of the First of the Dead has a dual meaning as well, as it can refer to Nito being the first to die or the birth of death itself. And since you took the soul of death, does that make you the Gravelord? I mean, you took his soul. Are you the existence of death itself now? Because what happens to the birth of death? Obviously death won't stop happening, but it's questions like these that make the Gravelord Nito so interesting. And I won't lie, even if the boss fight itself is dog shit, the character of Nito, with his backstory and future repercussions with you being the holder of the soul of Nito, make him and the Tomb of the Giants pretty interesting. Demon Ruins shall be the next destination, the birth of demons and the resting place of the bed of chaos. Before heading anywhere within the ruins, you must take care of the ceaseless discharge first. The brothers of Quelaag and Quelana, who is the most affected from the chaos flame that ravaged these lands. Let's firstly address his name. Ceaseless Discharge. May sound comical at first, but there's a few reasons for this bizarre name. He was mutated beyond recognition just like the other members of his family, however this curse affected him differently. He would constantly ooze out lava, filling up the demon ruins with it. Ceaseless meaning constant and unending, and discharge, the action of discharging a liquid, is a straightforward name and pretty blunt name to be called for addressing this mutation. However, yeah, it's kind of funny. To soothe his pains, his sisters gifted him an orange charred ring. However, the dumbass dropped it into the lava, leaving him to burn, eternally suffering. Here's where things get a little strange. It was thought that the corpse on the altar right across from the ceaseless discharge was that of Quelana. This does support the theory that she faked her own death, but leaving the memory of her with her whole attire right across from her brother burning eternally is kind of morbid. Some of the community theorizes that Quelana did truly die and you are simply speaking to her ghost. And I mean, this theory is actually quite convincing, as the main piece of evidence are the phrases she uses when she first meets you.
A mere undead, yet you can see me. Fascinating. I am Quelana of Izalith. I am not often revealed to walkers of flesh.
These phrases imply that Quelaag is not a physical being and is only seen by certain individuals. While it's true that Quelaag exhibits survivor's guilt and is referred to as the only one who survived the chaos, it's still very possible that Quelaag's ghost is haunted by her own guilt and the memories of what happened in the chaos so much that she's unable to move on as a ghost. She may not have been the only person who survived. She very well could have been the only person who didn't. Regardless if she faked her own death or merely believes that she's alive, her brother is not too happy about you desecrating her corpse and taking the gold-hemmed black set, which, fun fact, you used to be able to upgrade this set on the Xbox 360, but I guess that was patched because it was kind of overpowered. And by the way, if you use this set and wield a scythe, you kinda look like the Grim Reaper. This boss fight can go pretty bad if you're earlier on in the game. However, there's a method on defeating this boss that is often coined as a cheese method. However, I really don't like the use of the word cheese. FromSoft have always been known to have small little gimmicks with their boss fights to make them exceptionally easier, or even a one-hit boss. However, there's a good reason for this boss to throw himself off the cliff in this situation. I mean, after all, there's a specific animation for this. Her brother, with quite literally nothing left to live for, only has the sister's corpse to guard, and is all that he has left in this world. So you just, randomly coming up and taking it would leave him to make such a drastic decision to jump across the cliffside and hang off the bridge. For even a small chance of getting back what he's defending, he will throw his life away for his sister. And it's tragic that he does, even though she's only around a 3 to 4 minute walk away with light traffic according to Google Maps. Fighting this boss the conventional way is still not easy by no means. The mixture of a massive health pool, considerable damage, strong enough to one-hit you if you're not careful, and tough hitboxes make this boss fight particularly challenging. And it's not hard to understand why when this boss is easily one of the biggest bosses in any Soulsborne game. But when you finally come out victorious and defeat this boss, there is an end to the ceaseless discharge of lava and the pool of discharge is no more. The next location is easily one of the coolest design destinations as well, despite garnering mixed reactions from the players. I honestly believe that the atmosphere and unique aesthetic make this area damn awesome and visually striking, with the view of the fiery charred ground and the ruined walls and statues give off quite an old foreboding civilization lost in time. However, I totally understand why the Demon Ruins may not be everyone's cup of tea, because this area is pretty much the birthplace of demons, which could have been one of the best areas to visit in the entire franchise if they gave it more time. It does have some serious lost potential. When you think birthplace of the demons, you think, holy crap, dude, there's gonna be a lot of bosses and enemies here for me to fight. However, guess how many enemies there are for you to discover. There's 4. There's the demonic statue, there's the chaos eater, the chaos bug, and burrowing rockworm, and none of which really pose that much of a threat at all. The Taurus demon and Capra demons are recycled just to be ordinary enemies, which is quite cool. However, there's an argument that it ruins the magic of them being a boss in the first place. I understand that things like this happen with Souls games, however, I would have excused it if there were more variety of enemies. On top of that, the Demon Fire Sage boss is pretty much the Asylum Demon and Stray Demon combined. I won't lie, this boss can be pretty hard if you hadn't gone back to North Asylum Demon and found the Stray Demon to learn from its moves, but I do find this boss to be enjoyable. I don't know what it is. I used to hate the Stray Demon and Fire Sage Demon, but I don't know, I actually like these. I like them, man. They're pretty cool. Nothing much to say on that front, but remember how I mentioned the ceaseless discharge dropped the ring that his sisters gifted him? Well, turns out that ring is gonna be the next boss. The Centipede Demon is a formidable foe found in the lower levels, wielding no weapons, but instead it uses its multiple heads to attack its opponents. This giant thing has a total of 6 heads. These heads can extend, spit fireballs and be cut off off, and the right arm is the biggest and has the longest range, while the left head is used to grab opponents and put them into its toothed chest. When you kill it, the orange charred ring that the centipede demon drops is vital to progress through Lost Izalith. If you don't figure out that you need to wear it, you will not be able to reach the bed of chaos at all. I do want to mention I really appreciated how this was one boss fight right after the other that fits well with the location that we're exploring. I only hoped that this kind of momentum kept up and, you know, we'd constantly be fighting demons or even respawning demon bosses in an arena type event, because we are after all in the birthplace of all demons. However, Lost Izalith was an extremely rushed zone that was even confirmed in a DesignWorks interview, which is sad to see. However, to play devil's advocate, it may not have been the easiest things in the world to recreate a seamless interconnected world from Zen's Fortress to Lost Izalith with a crazy amount of detail, especially, you know, first being on the Xbox 360 and PS3. Because we know from personal experience that we could barely handle Blighttown, but I do wish the remaster focused a little on the expansion. However, it was just a remaster and not a remake. There is evidence of Lost Izalith actually being bigger originally, but a lot of the works had to be scrapped. Solaire of Astora can also be summoned here to help you fight the centipede demon, where you will fight with him for the last time, and for most people on their first few playthroughs, Solaire will have the same fate. You can find him after this boss fight asking himself why he cannot find it, entirely lost in thought and losing his marbles. This right here is completely gut-wrenching to hear, because Solaire never seemed to lose hope under any circumstances. He was always happy to see you and talk to you, which can leave a lot of players just completely confused and lost. However, later on, things can get extremely tragic. Before arriving at the location of the Bed of Chaos, you need to walk past a gloomy hallway and discover the fate of Solaire. You'll find a faint light in the distance, and upon walking closer, it appears to be human who doesn't hesitate to start attacking you. This at first could seem like any hostile NPC encounter, but when you see the armor set of Solaire's designed chest piece, things get real pretty damn quick. Solaire has completely changed character now, and honestly extremely rapidly, seeing as he was helpful not that long ago with the centipede demon. He starts talking about how he's found his own son, and then he starts stating that he is the son. He is wearing a strange headpiece that seems to be controlling him. The first time I encountered Solaire here, it was honestly heartbreaking. He was one of the only NPCs that seemed like a brother to me. I was always uncertain of his quest, however, this completely caught me off guard. I didn't even want to attack. I had no idea how to feel. However, as he continued to press me and I kept on taking damage over time, it became clear that there was no option, and when I defeated him, it was the only victory that felt like a true failure. That sense of despair and dread this entire game was building up had another element suddenly join in: heartbreak. Solaire can seem like a very relatable character to most, and having him around this journey made it more enjoyable and comforting. And without him now, it's back to the feeling that you had at the start of the game: loneliness and despair. When Solaire is defeated and the sunlight maggot headpiece is dropped, the description titles it as a loathsome parasite. When wearing this, it acts as a light source for the player. However, there is still one thing that I question to this day. Why doesn't the sunlight maggot affect the player when they wear it? Yet it completely took control of Solaire. This is where another debate pops up, similar to that of Big Hat Logan's fate. Did Solaire go hollow, or did he just go insane? If he went hollow, it would have described the sunlight maggot having no effect over us. However, why would he even bother to wear it? And how did his condition progress so rapidly? I believe that he did not go hollow. However, the sunlight maggot may affect those who are weak and are close to going hollow. Perhaps he did not even know what a sun was and genuinely thought that this piece of light was a sun. I don't believe that, but I just want to theorize it. I'm unsure of what the reasons are behind his fate or how he even got here in the first place, and if anyone wants to drop their own theory down in the comments below, it would be much appreciated, because there's an endless amount of theories. If you know your way around Dark Souls, however, you'd know that there's a way to save his life by offering 30 humanity to Quelaag's sister in Quelaag's domain after joining her covenant, and going through a shortcut next to the Fire Sage demon to kill the Sunlight Maggot before it even latches itself onto Solaire. However, not a lot of players will figure this out themselves, as like I said, the game doesn't exactly tell you these kinds of things. Now, we set our sights on the Bed of Chaos finally, and this is the final boss in Lost Izalith, representing the twisted being of chaos, the Witch of Izalith herself. Hidetaka Miyazaki describes the design and development of the Bed of Chaos as being particularly challenging, due to the difficulties in finding a common goal between the designers and the artists. He states, and I quote, "I suppose the Bed of Chaos is the principal example of this. The artists and designers worked extremely hard and came up with some fantastic designs, but it exposed a real problem in our production method. We had no way to find a common goal and work towards it when things went wrong. It's definitely something I want to correct in the future." This quote does highlight the difficulties in creating the Bed of Chaos boss fight and the importance of collaboration between the developers in creating a game world, but it does explain why a lot of players may have disliked this boss. The Bed of Chaos takes the form of a huge tree with a humanoid-ish shape. It attacks with two arm-like limbs that eventually sprout flaming limbs that resemble wings. But importantly, the imagery of the Bed of Chaos also aligns with a reoccurring theme of motherhood and reproduction. The Bed of Chaos could resemble a uterus with each side of the dome representing an ovary, and the player crawls into the canal to kill the fetus inside the womb. In terms of strategy for defeating the Bed of Chaos, it's pretty much trial and error but more forgiving. For starters, you'd need to head to either side of the boss and take out two of its energy sources, and when you take out one, it'll stay gone. Even if you die and come back, it'll still be gone, which is great, you know? When you run across the arena to the other side, the ground starts to crumble, leaving you to avoid falling into the rubble and jump across the gaps. I mean, this is pretty fun, but this is all there really is to this fight. You just take out these two energy sources, then run into the core of the boss and take out its life source. The Witch of Izalith being one of the founders of the Soul of Life, this boss fight is admittedly anticlimactic. But anyway, yeah, cool, we're done with that. Now we're on to the fourth and final soul that needs to be collected before we finally face Gwyn. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, Siath. Oh, forgot about Siath. Oh, poor doggo. Before we can head down to the new Londo Ruins, we need to head back to Andre the Blacksmith and purchase the Crest of Artorias. Head back to the Darkroot Garden and open the magically sealed door to only be attacked by the forest hunters led by Alvina. But you can join them, and this covenant awards you with invading other players by gifting you Titanite shards to Titanite chunks, or just rubbish, like literal rubbish. There are also these little cute mushroom people things here too who are completely neutral to your presence, so if you decide to kill them, you're a piece of shit. And then eventually we will make our way to the grave of Artorias, and that big doggo Siath will not be happy that you're there. Siath should be done earlier in the game when you're not as high of a level, however I think it's perfect to wait until the last minute to fight him now because it's funny. I'm not gonna lie though, Siath is a really cool designed boss, and I mean, all of them are so far. Siath was once the loyal knight of Artorias, the Abyss Walker. However, the ring he uses to traverse the Abyss is right here, and we need that for the Four Kings, so we got to put down the good boy. Unless you completed the DLC and fought alongside the younger version of Siath and he remembers you, making him not want to fight you, you'd need to fight him. Regardless, I mean, you now have have the ring so we can head straight to New Londo Ruins. New Londo was once a utopia, a great city that held a thriving culture. It could be that this city was built by the undead to rival the city of the gods, seeing as this area is called New Londo. This city was ruled over by the four kings, which Gwyn granted a part of his lord soul to. However, the kings were seduced by Karth, another primordial serpent like Frampt. Karth offered to teach the ability of life drain to the four kings, which break the chains of mortality among men. The four kings could not resist, then New Londo plunged into darkness, and their knights became dark wraiths. We know from reading the item description of the Dark Hand, an ability that the Dark Wraiths have, they too were incited by Karth, and used the power of the Dark Soul to absorb humanity. To contain this evil, the city was flooded and sealed away, as we can read from the item description from the key to the seal. The sealers flooded New Londo to banish the Dark Wraiths and the four kings. The agonizing decision was made with the realization that countless lives and the robust culture of the city would be lost. The victims now roam the ruins as ghosts. There were 3 sealers who were appointed to watch over the ruins and await the Lord Vessel Bearer, who was prophesied to defeat the corrupted 4 kings. By the time that the player reaches New Londo, only one of the sealers remains, and he has a cool outfit. Ingwood doesn't mind a little chat, but eventually he will gift you a key which you can use to drain the water and search for the 4 kings. This area, just like most areas in the game, really is wildly different compared to the other areas in the game. It not only has its own tone, but has a whole story to the city, which is something that Dark Souls does so well with its world building. There's a kind of calm yet foreboding atmosphere in this area, and if you don't know where you're going, it can be a nightmare to find your way, with not only the different paths you can take, but the ghosts that you cannot hit unless you use the transient curse or equip an occult or divine weapon to do damage. I feel that this area does have the perfect balance of challenge and difficulty. However, I do wish that there was more to see here, because the city is extremely cool and detailed when you drain the water, but it seems kind of small as well. The Dark Wraiths are now going to be encountered for the first time. These are enemies that are also present within Dark Souls 3 and arguably harder in Dark Souls 3, because I mean the player encounters them a lot earlier on. Eventually you'll make it to a spiral staircase that leads to complete darkness, but if you equip the Ring of Artorias, you'll be able to jump down and safely land to face against the 4 kings. Environmental storytelling is extremely important here, as those who take the time to read the description of items would know what the ring should do and wear it for this plunge. However, if you just skip over every line of dialogue and never read item descriptions and essentially try and speed run the game, you'll run into brick walls. This boss fight can be quite a breeze depending on what level you are. However, it's not exactly the easiest on your first go. You need to make sure that you attack the first king as soon as possible and do as much damage as possible before the other kings start to spawn. And that's pretty much the long and short of this entire fight. However, the environment doesn't make this a walk in the park either, due to no real environment at all. You're essentially inside the abyss. You're abyss walking. You're in complete and utter darkness, which leaves you with little to no depth perception. So figuring out how far away your opponent is from your attack can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes. However, with this boss down, you now have all the necessary components to activate the Lord Vessel and reach the end game. The fight against Gwyn is spectacular, both in visuals and a balanced fight. But the music is extremely awesome, probably one of the best boss soundtracks in any game to date. It seems both heroic and extremely sad at the same time. I haven't addressed a lot of the soundtracks in this game, as I didn't want to get in the way of the flow of this script, but each one is perfect. Dark Souls always have an incredible soundtrack. I mean, hell, all of the FromSoft games invest so much time and effort into curating the best tracks that fit the themes of the games they produce so well, and this game is no exception. The The Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and Firelink Shrine soundtracks will go down in history and help prolong this game's cultural longevity. However, in terms of this segment itself, here's where Dark Souls 1 shines the most in my opinion: the endings. There are two endings within this game that the player decides based on personal beliefs and whatever you deem to be moral. This has been done in many games, so it doesn't sound as special when I say it like that, but the reason why Dark Souls do it the best is because there isn't a wrong decision. In fact, it's a decision that is still highly debated to today. For the whole game, you've been told to link the flame, and it seems like it's your only mission. This ending is known as the linking of the fire. You sacrifice yourself as Gwyn once did to prolong the age of fire, and let this world live on for longer and fulfill Kingseeker Framt's goal. But the reason why I highlighted New Londo last is because Karth, another primordial serpent, can be found at the bonfire of the Four Kings in the Abyss, who offers an alternative way of thinking. Karth tells you about the gods finding their souls and your ancestors finding the Dark Soul. He explains that Gwyn resisted the course of nature and you must destroy him and usher in the Age of Dark. This at first could seem like the bad ending, but when you think about it, is it really? Linking the flame seems canon to most people. However, I don't think that this ending is the right ending to have, as I once did. I mean, it does seem like this is the moral choice, because you're saving the world, but why? Why save this world if you're only prolonging the inevitable? After all, we've seen what kind of monstrosities emerge from attempting to unnaturally prolong this world. The demon ruins and the curses are a perfect example of that. And this whole dilemma, the Age of Fire, was only built upon the bloodshed of the eternal dragons, killed for simply being in the way. However, the beauty of this game is the choice is yours to make. You're free to not only choose, but to think whatever you want when it comes to the lore of this game and how things should play out. Dark Souls 1 is a game that stands out for its challenging but rewarding gameplay, intricate and unique level design with so many locations, enemies and NPCs to meet, with such a deep and complex lore that ties into the whole adventure, locations and gameplay in a way that no other game company has managed to capture. Every playthrough is incredibly fun and gratifying, and I constantly learn something new or come up with some crazy theory that's probably off the mark 99% of the time. But that's the beauty of it. Miyazaki has managed to catch lightning in so many different bottles. I love playing with the story in my head and trying out different playstyles that changes the whole experience dramatically. This is why Dark Souls is a masterpiece. I want to thank many YouTubers who helped me understand the lore. The many Reddit posts in the Dark Souls subreddit that discussed theories and concepts. And lastly, the Dark Souls wiki and lore websites that structured things in a very clear and concise way for the community to understand. Researching for this video was incredibly fun, and I have to say that I loved every moment that I made this video, regardless of how many people end up deciding to click on it. But if you want to subscribe and all of that jazz, do so, because I'm going to instantly start preparing for a script for Dark Souls 2, a criminally underrated game that is a masterpiece as well in its own way. So be sure to look out for that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching very much. Thanks for watching. Don't know what else to say. My name's Moldy Fish Sticks, and have a spanking day. And you know what? As always, stay safe, stay sexy, stay humble. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Suck your nipple.